The radicalization of American liberal whites, and a friend of mine suggested white females. I think whites is good enough for me. Hello, I'm Pastor Marvin McKenzie, and let me begin by saying this is not a hate message. This is not an attack on people. It's not a political rant, and it's an observation and a warning. For years, we've heard discussions about the radicalization of certain groups around the world. We're told that most people within those groups are peaceful, sincere, and well-meaning, but that some are intentionally pushed toward extreme beliefs through propaganda, pressure, and repetition. And whether one agrees with that narrative or not, the idea behind it is widely accepted. People can be shaped slowly and intentionally into radical positions without even realizing it. Now, what concerns me today is that I see a very similar process happening here at home, particularly among American liberal whites. I'm not saying that liberals are radicals. I'm not saying that liberalism itself equals extremism. And I'm certainly not saying that people are on the political left are evil. Many, probably most, are sincere. They care about people. They want justice. They believe they're doing what is right. This isn't about motives. It's about methods. Radicalization is rarely loud at the beginning. It's gradual, relational, and it feels moral. And it almost always claims the high ground. When analysts talk about radicalization overseas, they usually describe a process, repeated exposure to one narrative, emotional framing rather than factual balance, demonizing alternative viewpoints, creating an us versus them worldview, rewarding loyalty, and punishing dissent. And over time, the individual becomes convinced that disagreement is not just wrong, but dangerous. Now pause for a moment. If we're honest, these same mechanisms are increasingly visible in American culture today, not through religion, but through ideology. Let me briefly walk through four major forces driving this process. First, there's the mainstream media. Modern media no longer exists to simply inform. It exists to shape perception. Stories are framed to provoke outrage. Language is carefully chosen to assign moral guilt. Opposing viewpoints are either caricatured or ignored altogether. When someone hears the same interpretation of reality every day, especially one reinforced emotionally, they stop asking questions, not because they're stupid, but because they believe the conclusions have already been settled. Second, public education and higher education. Education used to teach how to think. Increasingly, it tells people what to think. From a young age, students are trained to view the world through power structures, oppressors, and victims, privileged and marginalized. Faith is often presented as backward. Tradition is dangerous. National heritage is something to apologize for. And by the time many students graduate, they haven't simply learned facts, they've absorbed a worldview, and challenging it feels like betrayal. Third, political rhetoric. Political language today is not primarily persuasive, it's moralistic. Opponents are no longer mistaken. They are labeled hateful, ignorant, or a threat to democracy itself. Once politics becomes moral warfare, compromise disappears, and radical positions begin to feel not just acceptable, but necessary. And then fourth, there's the social media algorithms. This may be the most powerful force of all. Algorithms are not neutral. They reward emotion, especially anger, fear, and outrage. Users are slowly fed content that confirms what they already believe while dissenting voices disappear. The individual feels informed while being carefully guided toward more extreme conclusions. It's quiet, it's efficient, and it works. Now, here's where Scripture becomes essential. The Bible warned us long before cable news, universities, or social media ever existed. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The word conformed means pressed into a mold. The world always has a mold. Every generation does. The danger is not disagreement. The danger is unexamined conformity. When believers adopt the language, assumptions, and moral frameworks of the culture without biblical testing, they're no longer thinking Christianly. They are thinking culturally, and that is how radicalization succeeds. Radicalization does not always wear violent clothing. Sometimes it wears compassion. Sometimes it speaks the language of justice. Sometimes it comes with applause. But when ideology replaces truth, when disagreement becomes moral evil, when Scripture is sidelined in favor of slogans, the danger is already present. The answer is not anger. The answer is not fear. The answer is not withdrawal. The answer is discernment. Christians must love people deeply and think biblically clearly. We are called to engage the world, but never to be reshaped by it. That's always been the challenge, and it's ours again today.